We're back. We're back. We're back. Why is he singing? I hope he never does that again. What's up, Antioch? It's episode 2 of It's Tricky.
It's tricky to rock around, that's right, on time, it's tricky. How is it, Dave? It's tricky.
Our new YouTube sermon series about tricky questions or topics that are facing Christians. Super glad that you're here right now. I'm pumped that you're hanging out with me over the YouTubes. So today we're asking the question, why does God allow suffering? And no, this is not a coincidence that we're talking about this in the midst of one of the biggest pandemics that we've ever seen.
Why is this happening?
People all around the world are asking this question right now. Why is this happening? Thousands of people are dying. More than 500,000 people have gotten this disease, and it's going up every single day. What does God have to say in the middle of this about suffering and this human condition? You know, sometimes Christians try to belittle the suffering. They try to act like it's not a big deal because they think that they're doing God a favor. The key is not minimizing the suffering. The key is magnifying God's goodness, because His goodness, His character is evident despite the suffering that's going on. So here's the underlying answer. I'm going to go ahead and just give you the answer right now. God allows suffering because He allows love. Let's think about Incredibles 2 for a minute. So when the evil lady puts the screenslaver little goggle thingies, you know what I'm talking about. Whenever she puts those on you, you are under her sway. So whatever she tells you to do, you're gonna do it. So if you can only do what she's telling you to do, you have no choice. And if you have no choice, then you can't really be held responsible for the things that you do. So whether someone said, "I love you," while they had those on, or they kicked you in the face while they had those on, either way, they wouldn't really be responsible for what they did. And it's the same thing for us. If you take away our ability to choose, then you also take away our ability to love. But when He did that, He also opened up the opportunity to choose evil. And God was willing to take that risk because He knew how beautiful love would be. The thing about suffering is, God's goodness isn't really in question. Because if God simply allowed us to choose, He was doing that for a good reason, to allow us to love one another and to love Him. Even if we know that God doesn't cause the suffering in the world, suffering still exists. We still live in a hard world. And so the question then is,
What do I do now?
what are we as Christians supposed to do in the midst of this suffering? So we're going to look at 3 different people in the Bible that can teach us a lesson about suffering. Person number 1, remember, we're looking through the lens of Jesus is our lens for everything, right? We already talked about this in our video last week. Jesus went through tremendous suffering for you and me, for the entire world to be saved. He went through extreme suffering. God doesn't call us to go through something that He wouldn't be willing to go through Himself. If God's calling us to withstand suffering, how much more did Jesus experience suffering on the cross when He died for us? If anyone on earth did not deserve to suffer, it was Jesus, the Son of God. I mean, He knows a guy. He can get a hookup. It was through suffering. It was through suffering specifically that love, redemption, and victory came. Excuse me. It says this, that God disarmed the rulers and authorities, and He put them to open shame by triumphing over them in Him, in Jesus. Here's the thing, is that the cross is a story of victory, no matter what it looks like on the outside. On the outside, it looks horrific. It looks like suffering. It looks like a shameful death. But here's the truth in Jesus, is that it actually was a victory over the enemy. It's a victory. It's putting Satan to open shame, even though he was the one dying a shameful death. How does that make sense? The kingdom of God is an upside down kingdom. And so we win, we have victory when we go through suffering with self-sacrificial love. That's how the people of God succeed. Bible person number 2. Don't lie, one of you at least thought that said job. It's not Job, it's Job. It's the dude from the Old Testament, and this dude had a rough life, I'm not gonna lie. Job is one of those guys that nobody names their kid after. Let's just say it that way. Job loses everything. He loses all of his wealth, he loses all of his kids, he loses all of his livestock, he has boils all over his body. I mean, this was like the worst day ever. And on top of that, he has friends who are saying, ooh, you must have done something real bad. God's mad at you. This is a punishment from heaven. Quick pause. Some people say that if you have misfortune in your life, it's because God is mad at you because you have sin in your life. Some Christians have even claimed that the coronavirus is a judgment because of sin. Well, God explicitly rebukes this approach in Job. In Job 42, he comes to Job's friends who keep telling him that he's done something wrong, and he said his anger was stirred up against them because they spoke of him wrongly. So if you hear this message going around, you can know that this is speaking untruthfully about God. Now, it says that Job did not sin with his mouth, but he did question, God, where are you? And as he continued to go, he kept questioning God, saying, God, you must not hear me. You must not care about me. And he specifically questioned why he should suffer, given that he lived a righteous life. We all tend to believe that we kind of have a right to happiness and having a good life as long as we're doing the right thing, as long as we got good morals going on. In Job 38, verse 4 through 7, I'm going to read the easy to read. It says this: where were you when I made the earth? If you are so smart, answer me. And who decided how big the earth should be? Who measured it with a measuring line? What is the earth resting on? Who put the first stone in its place when the morning stars sang together and the angels shouted with joy? So what's the point of Job? Suffering may not make any sense. You may feel like it's totally out of left field. You may feel like it doesn't make sense at all and that you have a right to live a better life. But you aren't God, and God is sovereign. See, when we question God about things like suffering, it's like a preschooler trying to have a conversation about astrophysics. Or it's like me trying to have a conversation about The Bachelor. We have no idea what we're talking about. We think we have these rights, but God is our creator. It's like in Romans 9 when Paul says, does the clay have any right to question the potter? Which brings us to our third biblical character. The Apostle Paul is my dude. Paul writes some of the most incredible and encouraging things about suffering. Specifically in Romans 8, he says this, verse 16. The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And if children, then we are heirs. Heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ. Listen to this. Provided we suffer with him, and in order that we may also be glorified with him. See, suffering is not actually something to avoid at all costs. It's actually something that shapes us into the image of Christ because Jesus came and suffered for you and me. It's almost like God takes what the enemy meant for evil and turns it for good.
You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good.
Oh wait, that's what Paul says a few verses later. Romans 8:28. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. All things, not just the good things, not just the bad things, all things, all the sufferings, God works it together for good. See, God knew that allowing us the choice to love would allow us to choose evil. But God takes that very evil and he works it for good. This is what God does. His full-time job is reminding Satan that love is more powerful than suffering and that Jesus has triumphed over him on the cross. I want to encourage you to share this with 3 of your friends today. We got a lot of people who need to hear an encouraging word about what God's up to in the middle of suffering. So make sure you share this. We're doing Wednesday Live tonight at 7 p.m. right here on our YouTube channel. Please check it out. Stay classy.